Oh, okay. So I guess I have to talk about Star Wars again. Didn't really want to do this because I spent about a decade defending the prequels. I am one of those really crazy people online that actually enjoyed the prequels. They were good movies. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about The Last Jedi. And to be perfectly honest, I thought the movie was okay. This is not an opinion that anybody seems to have. Nobody seems to be saying it's okay. Everyone is saying it's garbage. It's the worst movie ever made. There is a YouTube video saying that The Last Jedi is objectively bad. Every time I hear someone say something is objectively bad, that makes me very angry because that's just a definition. That's just like you need to get a dictionary, buddy, because you don't seem to know what the word objective means. So when I see things like that, it really annoys me. Um, one guy actually said that he hopes that the people that created The Last Jedi and all the people involved in it get cancer and die. That's how badly people feel about this movie. You know how strongly they feel, and I think a lot of this hatred and vitriol, I think a lot of this has to do with the same things that made people angry about the prequels. It was unmet expectations. It didn't live up to um, their childhood memories. It sort of trampled over what they remember, how they viewed Star Wars, how they feel Star Wars should be. You got people online, listing all of these things that say they don't make sense, or why this, and why that. But if you look at the original movies, there's all kinds of flaws. In fact, I just had a marathon with my kids. I just watched all seven movies all over again to prepare for The Last Jedi. And I noticed there was a lot of flaws, especially in the original trilogy. There was a lot of flaws. I don't want to get into that. But if you really judge those movies with the same critical eye that you were to judge any of the other movies, whether it's the prequels or The Last Jedi, you're going to see the same kinds of problems, the same kinds of criticism you can make. But all of those things get excused when it comes to the originals. And I think the reason for that is because, and I've been saying this for more than a decade, when we were kids, we did not judge movies in the same way. I don't remember as a kid going to see Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. I saw Empire when I was 5, or Return of the Jedi when I was 8. I don't remember leaving the theater with my friends and talking about the acting or plot holes or trying to dissect the film scene by scene to try to make sense of everything. We didn't do that. Instead, we talked about the things we loved. We said, "Wow, that was really cool. Did you see that? That Walker was that cool? Did you see how big that Vader's Super Star Destroyer was? Or wasn't it cool when the Millennium Falcon flew in to the Death Star and blew it up? Or wasn't it cool when Vader picked up the Emperor and spoiler alert, and threw him down the reactor shaft?" I mean, all those are the kinds of things that got us excited. It was the visuals. It was the being transported to another world, seeing these amazing locations, seeing all these really cool creatures, seeing these exciting battles and explosions. Those are the things that I think made Star Wars what it is. It wasn't that it was flawless storytelling. Flawless storytelling doesn't exist. And if you really want flawless storytelling, you should probably watch, a boring movie like A River Runs Through It, where a guy just fishes for 2 hours. You're like, fishing was totally realistic, but it's also really boring. Who cares? I mean, that's not why we love Star Wars. We love Star Wars because there's cool stuff in it. And this is what I think, gets kids excited about Star Wars. This is why my kids love Star Wars. They love all the movies. They don't make a distinction between the prequels and the originals. They see them as all pretty much one saga, you know? So, so this is why I get annoyed when people are judging these movies from the perspective of a 40-year-old jaded critic. And I always try to look at things the way I feel that people would originally have looked at things back in the 80s. If The Last Jedi came out in 1980, would everybody be furious and angry and leaving the theater wanting to burn the theater down? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that part of the problem is that we're living in a here. Let me turn to this. We're living in a YouTube generation where, for the first time in history, people have the ability to express their passions and their feelings about something. So I'm sure that even when Empire Strikes Back came out, I'm sure there was a lot of people that were really furious and didn't like that movie and didn't think it lived up to the hype and didn't think it was, as good as the original Star Wars, but they had no forum to express that opinion. They didn't have a platform to speak to millions of people around the world and to talk about how much they hated something. So this is very much a YouTube thing. So now I want to really talk now about the specifics of The Last Jedi. And again, I didn't think it was a great movie, but the reason I didn't think it was great wasn't because of some perceived flaw, but it was more that it didn't have the positives. I think that when I look at a movie, I like to look at things by the positives. And this is a much more difficult thing to articulate. And it's very hard to make YouTube videos and say, well, I didn't like this movie because it didn't have enough interesting stuff in it. But that's kind of how I felt about The Last Jedi. It wasn't quite as clever or as interesting, I felt, than the other movies. It didn't have, it only had one interesting planet, which was Crate. And I thought, and even then I thought it looked a little bit too much like Hoth. So, I would have liked to have seen more imaginative locations, places that more like what you see in the prequels, like Utapau and Mustafar and Coruscant and Naboo. Like, I love those locations. Those are amazing. Like, I look at them like, wow, like I feel transported to another world. I look at Crate, I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. There's salt and there's a red dirt underneath. Okay, that's kind of neat. Canto Bight was another place that I just thought it was just boring. There's nothing really wrong with it. It just wasn't a very interesting place. I felt like, I thought, a casino, when I heard about there's a casino planet in this movie, I thought that was kind of interesting. I said, I'd love to see, what Star Wars does with a casino. A casino in another galaxy in the Star Wars universe. That'd be really amazing. And then when you see it on screen, it almost looks like they just took a camera crew to Las Vegas and just filmed a casino there. It was boring. The aliens there weren't very interesting. I watched the movie twice. I was looking for interesting creatures and aliens, and honestly, I thought there were more interesting aliens in the original Cantina in the original Star Wars. So it just, not a major criticism, but it just those dog horse-like creatures weren't very interesting. It looked like they took a greyhound and a horse and just kind of fused them together and made this weird hybrid creature. And they didn't look very appealing. I don't know. But again, it's hard to articulate that. And I think that's part of the problem with making YouTube videos and kind of expressing. It's easier to say, well, here's this flaw, this didn't make sense. It's easier to express that than to express, well, I just didn't find it that thrilling. There was no really great lightsaber fights in the movie. I thought the space battles weren't particularly interesting. When I had my Star Wars marathon, I also watched Rogue One. And I thought that the Rogue One space battle was amazing. The battle over Scarif, it looked really great. We saw a lot of cool things, a lot of great shots. The space battle over the Death Star, The New Hope, is really amazing. It's very gripping. It's very exciting. Again, Return of the Jedi, great space battle. We didn't have one interesting space battle in The Last Jedi. It was kind of dark. It was kind of I really couldn't see very well. And I like the idea of dropping the bombs, even though there's no gravity in space. That actually bothers me more because I'm a bit of a science nerd. So for me, I'm like, how are these bombs dropping when there's no gravity? They weren't even near a planet, so that didn't really make a lot of sense. And all I can say is like maybe they're just pushing the bombs out. I don't know, but or they also have like these lasers that sort of arc toward another ship. It looks like it's being acted on by gravity because it's arcing, and in space that wouldn't happen. You throw a baseball in space, it's not going to arc downward. It's just going to keep on going forever. So that kind of bothered me a little bit, but again, I mean, it wasn't awful. I loved the introduction to Rose. You learn about Rose through Rose's sister, who dies early in the movie, and I thought that was a really cool way to introduce her character, and how she had a little gold moon pendant, and Rose had the same one. I thought that was cool. A lot of people are just hating on the character of Rose. They're saying she's awful. I didn't think she was an amazing character, but I thought she was interesting in that we got to see the people who were sort of the less important people. Luke and Han and Leia, they're like the heroes of the rebellion. These are the great people. There's a Jedi, and there's a princess, and there's a famous smuggler, but we never get to see the people that are kind of working down below decks, who are in charge of loading the guns or cleaning the toilets or something. And so I thought that was interesting, seeing the common folk, and their struggles. I thought it helped to kind of humanize the war, because Star Wars has always been, it's a war in space, but it's a very sanitized war. You never really get a sense that this is like a real war, and there's real sacrifices and people dying. I mean, you see people dying in like A New Hope. You see a lot of the X-Wing fighters getting blown up, but you don't really know who these people are. You don't know if they have families. You don't see the consequences of their death. Here, you see that Rose's sister sacrifices herself to complete the mission, and then you see how that impacted Rose's character. This is something we've never seen before in Star Wars, and I think this is something that people are really looking for in a Star Wars film. And for me, what I want to see personally, what I want to see in a Star Wars movie, is I want to see the universe expanded. I want to see how we can take these movies and expand them so that it makes the original trilogy better. And this is why, I really my favorite new movie, post prequel movie, has been Rogue One, because I think Rogue One expanded our knowledge of Star Wars, and I think it informed the original trilogy. It gave us a little bit more information about the original trilogy, so that when Luke blows up the Death Star, it's a little more meaningful, because we know the backstory behind it. We know what was sacrificed to get those plans. So I think it makes it a better story. And this is why I didn't like The Force Awakens. I really, and I think it's funny, I always seem to be on the wrong side of these things. My opinion always seems to be the unpopular one, because everybody loved The Force Awakens so much. And I was hugely disappointed. I left the theater and I was upset. I was like, this is awful. And I actually wasn't very excited for The Last Jedi. And the reason for it wasn't really because I thought there was anything wrong logically with The Force Awakens. I didn't like that it was a retread of A New Hope. I don't want to see the same movie made over again, because to me, and I've actually heard people say, well, it's okay to copy, other movies copy, but this is copying another Star Wars movie. It's a Star Wars movie that copies another Star Wars movie. I mean, that's a problem. And when they blow up Starkiller Base, it's basically doing something that was done 2 times already. I mean, it was already kind of redundant to see a second Death Star. Now we're basically seeing a third Death Star. And the worst part of it is that not only did they do the Death Star 3 times, but when you watch them trying to blow up Starkiller Base, it seems much easier than when they tried to blow up any of the other Death Stars. The first 2 Death Stars, it was much more difficult, and there was much more drama blowing that up than blowing Starkiller Base. Blowing Starkiller Base was just Poe Dameron looked like he was having fun, like he was playing a video game, going woohoo and shooting all the little things, and it was a joke blowing up Starkiller. This is supposed to be the biggest, most deadly, most powerful base ever, and it was blown up easily. So that to me was a problem, because I thought it detracted from the original films. I also felt that The Force Awakens retconned Return of the Jedi, because you see the Return of the Jedi, and the Emperor's dead, and Darth Vader's dead, and Han and Leia are in love, and Luke is going to start a new School of Jedi, and it's like this wonderful conclusion, and everyone's celebrating, and then The Last Jedi, which is the next movie, or The Force Awakens, which is the next movie in the saga, and what happens? Oh, the Empire's back, but they're bigger. And there's a bigger Death Star, and there's a bigger spaceships, and there's a bigger army, and for some reason the rebels are still rebels, even though 20 years has passed. What the hell happened to these people? And nothing made any sense, and Han and Leia are no longer together, and now he's a smuggler again. And Luke is still the only Jedi. And the Emperor's gone, but there's another guy that's kind of the Emperor 2.0 with Snoke. And Vader's gone, but there's another Vader called Kylo Ren. I'm like, to me, all of this was like, it was just a retcon. Like, people were complaining that The Last Jedi retcons Force Awakens, and I would say they should be more angry that Force Awakens seems to have retconned Return of the Jedi, which was the original in the canon, so people should feel more sensitive about that. People complain a lot, and they say that, The Last Jedi did not answer the questions that were set up in The Force Awakens. But what I would say to that is that the problems with The Last Jedi, that I also see that there's problems, originated with Force Awakens. I saw this coming. So for me, this wasn't a shock, because I know that J.J. Abrams, he sets up these mystery boxes with no intention of answering what's in the box. This is the problem with J.J.'s directing, and this is why I did not want him to be a part of Star Wars. But J.J. has gone on the record to say that I like mysteries, and questions are more interesting than answers. And I would say, well, I agree with that, except you need to have in mind some answers to those questions. Questions are interesting only if there are answers out there. And J.J. never intended to answer these questions. So, how did Maz Kanata get Luke's lightsaber that he lost in Empire Strikes Back? How did she get that? He had no intention of answering that. And I think Rian Johnson knew that. And so I think Rian Johnson kind of saw that these were flaws. I don't know exactly what people were hoping were going to be the answers to these mysteries, but any kind of answer that would have been given, I think, would have been a disappointment, or it wouldn't have been very interesting. So if Rian Johnson had said, well, Rey's parents are Luke, okay, is that's not going to have the same effect that, the I am your father scene had in Empire Strikes Back, because we didn't know that was coming. That was a surprise that we didn't know to expect, which was why it was such a surprise. No one was going into Empire Strikes Back wondering who Luke's father was. Nobody knew that. That's why it was such a, wow, it was amazing. Now, Rian Johnson's like, well, I need to surprise them. And everybody has these theories. Well, Rey must be Luke's daughter, or Rey must be Han Solo's daughter, or Rey must be maybe even Obi-Wan Kenobi's daughter. That would make sense. Maybe he's a granddaughter or something. But if any of those things had come true, and keep in mind, there's not that many people in the Star Wars universe that she could even be related to. If she was related to any of the major characters, it wouldn't have been a surprise or interesting. It would have been like, okay, But instead, I think Rian made the bold choice to actually surprise us by saying, oh, well, really, your parents are nobody. I thought that made it much more interesting. And it also made it a good story because it really kind of shows that anybody can be gifted in the Force. I mean, remember, Anakin was originally related to nobody. He was just a very gifted person. And that is how the Jedi Order really was created, is that you have these random children born around the galaxy who are just born gifted in the Force. And then the Jedi find them and then make them part of their cult. So basically, Rey is just one of these people, of a long generation of people that are gifted with the Force. And I think that's an important thing to show. And I think Rian Johnson, sort of hammers that idea home at the end of the movie when he shows that this kid reaches out and grabs the broom with the Force. It's showing that Force powers are out there. It's a natural part of life in this universe. And so it's possible that, Rey could just be a nobody and be born with the Force. You don't need to be related to anybody. And so I think, and that's why the Jedi Order is going to come back, because they can't stop the natural, I would say, mutations or midi-chlorians that just sort of come about with being Force sensitive. It just happens to people. So I thought that was really interesting. Another thing that, the bigger criticism, though, I think, people were saying, since when has there been mention of fuel? They're running out of fuel. This is a problem. It's a problem because it's a new thing. Let's be honest here. It's a problem because people have never seen it before. Well, why are people so upset about new things? I want new things. When I go to see a Star Wars movie, I want to see something I've never seen before. Every Star Wars movie showed us something radically different that we'd never seen before. Empire Strikes Back introduced Yoda, and Vader being Luke's father. Return of the Jedi introduced, Ewoks. But it seems that, and the Emperor who could shoot Force lightning. Well, when was that a thing? Force lightning, nobody complained about that. Nobody's like, we've never seen this lightning thing before. This makes us angry. This is not a problem for people that grew up with the original trilogy. And it's not a problem with the children who grew up with these movies. My kids saw this movie with me. They were angry. Since when do ships run out of fuel? And by the way, ships do run out of fuel because in the Phantom Menace, they ran out of fuel. The hyperdrive was leaking fuel, and they had to find more fuel, which is why they stopped over in Tatooine. And even if you want to, discard the prequels and pretend the prequels never happened, you also have an issue of fuel in Empire Strikes Back, where Han Solo, could only reach the Dagobah, or no, he could only reach Bespin. He couldn't go anywhere else. He couldn't go anywhere in the galaxy. He could only go to Bespin. So we know the fuel is a constraint. I mean, this is not something that Rian Johnson just made up, People say the Canto Bight scene was pointless. I would say the Canto Bight scene was a little boring, but the fact that the mission didn't succeed, that's a good thing. I mean, we shouldn't expect that every time a character does something, they're going to succeed, because that would be boring. To me, it was interesting that they went on this mission and they failed. They failed to do what they set out to do. To me, that's interesting because I didn't expect that. When I see a movie, I don't want to predict the whole movie from start to finish. That's another thing I hated about The Force Awakens. I predicted that movie almost scene by scene to the very end. I knew that at the very end, Rey was going to develop Force powers. I knew that she was going to, pull the lightsaber in her hand. I knew she was going to fight Kylo Ren. I knew that Starkiller Base was going to be blown up. All of that was, I was like, okay. You got people complaining about, ramming the Snoke ship, and saying, well, since when could you do that? Well, it's been established from as early as A New Hope that you got to be careful when you go light speed, because you might hit, a meteor and get destroyed. So, and it's simple physics. I mean, you ram a large object with another object, and you're going to cause some kind of destruction. And then people say, well, why haven't they been using this technique? Well, these capitalist ships are huge. They're miles across. You're going to build a missile that's miles across just to use it to ram other ships. I mean, you know, I don't know that that's something that, that necessarily would be a convenient way of fighting, you know. So I think it was a last ditch effort. They're like, well, we're not, this ship's about to get blown up anyway. Might as well use it to ram another ship. I mean, people didn't seem to have this problem in again, and I should call this the original trilogy test. If something didn't bother you in the original trilogy, which is similar, it shouldn't bother you in this movie. So in the original trilogy, we have a single fighter, a single A-wing fighter, crashes into the bridge of Vader's superstar destroyer, which is 10 miles long, and basically causes it to crash and blow up. So if a single fighter can take out the superstar destroyer, okay, I don't think people should have it by ramming it. I don't think people should have a problem with a huge cruise ship going light speed and blowing up this thing. So again, double standards, and the double standards exist because you grew up, buddy, and you're looking at things with a very critical eye. And finally, I want to talk about Luke. And I think Luke, in my opinion, this is the best Luke Skywalker we've ever seen. I mean, this is what I enjoyed most, is watching Luke Skywalker. I thought he was the most interesting character. I thought he was a very conflicted character. I thought the acting was amazing. This is Mark Hamill's best performance. Maybe this is because I never really liked Luke very much as a character. I mean, I remember when growing up as a kid, everybody wanted to be Han Solo. Nobody wanted to be Luke. When we played Star Wars, I want to be Han Solo. Everyone wanted to be Han. Why? Because Han is cool. Because Han, he's complex. Luke is like this kind of gee whiz, everyman sort of, Harry Potter, Link type character. He's not that interesting. Luke isn't that interesting. In this movie, he's very interesting. People say, why is he discouraged? Well, life is discouraging. I don't know if you know this, but old people tend to be a little bit jaded with life. Life tends to weigh you down. You tend to be less idealistic in your old age than as a young person. When I saw Rey acting all sort of idealistic, and we have to go. She had the idealism of youth, the same idealism that Luke had, and it's that youthful idealism that allowed Luke to be able to, convince Vader to go to the light side and sort of defeat the Emperor, because he had that idealism. But when you get older, you get jaded. There's a scene that stands out in my mind in Return of the Jedi when Vader says, it's too late for me, son. And it's a very emotional moment, And he's basically saying, I'm too old to change my thinking. So it really shows that when you get older, you get jaded. And that's what happened to Luke. He got jaded because a lot of shit happened in his life, And then people say, well, he shouldn't have gone to kill Kylo. And first of all, he didn't kill Kylo. It was a moment. But aside from that, people, when people say, well, he couldn't even kill his own father, who was Darth Vader. But I think people aren't really thinking this through. People need to think that in that moment, Vader was dying and he could really do no more harm. And killing Vader in that moment was just going to be an act of anger and hatred. He was going to kill him due to his anger and his hatred. It wasn't going to avail him anything to kill Vader. But Kylo, on the other hand, I see Kylo more as kind of baby Hitler. If Luke was a Jedi and he could see the future, and he could see that there was evil in Kylo, and he could see that there was a future possibility that Kylo could grow up to kill billions of people. And by the way, Kylo did kill billions of people using Starkiller Base. He was responsible for billions of lives being lost, way more than Hitler or Stalin ever killed, assuming that Hosnian Prime had billions of people, which let's say it did. Okay? So if you knew that killing one of your students, even if he's sleeping in cold blood, is going to save billions of people, I would do it. In fact, it seems to me that Luke made the wrong choice in not killing Kylo. He should have killed him if he knew that was going to prevent billions of people's lives. But what I think is interesting about that movie is that maybe Luke had a moral failing in turning on his lightsaber and in thinking about killing his nephew, and that moral failing kind of pushed him more to the dark side. And to me, that's kind of like a Greek tragedy. It's like he thought about doing something to prevent evil, and that's what caused the evil to happen. It's the same thing we saw in episode 3, where Anakin Skywalker, did everything in his power to save his wife, and that's what caused his wife to die. That goes back to Greek tragedy, where there's a prophecy that something terrible will happen, and then because of the prophecy, it ends up making you do the things that makes the prophecy be fulfilled. So I thought that was interesting. So those are my thoughts, mainly. And then, people talk about Rey being a Mary Sue, and she's too powerful. Again, I really don't have a problem with this. The reason I don't have a problem with it is because I'm like, so what? There's so many other characters in fiction that are very powerful. Superman is born with godlike powers. All the X-Men are just born with great powers. So they say, well, she doesn't have the same character arc. She doesn't really need to learn anything the way Luke did. Well, it's a different story. She's a different character in a different story. And I wouldn't want her to go on the hero's journey that Luke did. I wouldn't want her to do that. No, they're angry. They say, well, she should train to be more powerful. She just seems to know these things. Well, when did Luke train? I mean, Luke trained for a couple hours on board the Millennium Falcon with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then she trained for 2 days, or he trained for 2 days with Yoda on Dagobah. 2-3 days. How long was he on Dagobah? He couldn't have been on Dagobah for that long. So I mean, maybe give it a week most. How does Luke become so powerful in the Force because he trained for a couple days? But Rey, she's way too powerful because she only trained for, a few hours or something. Like, what is the big difference? I don't see what the problem is. If anything, everybody should be like, well, the prequel trilogy got it right because Anakin trained for 10 years under Obi-Wan. So he's the only one that actually got any real training in any of these movies. So again, that Rey criticism fails the original trilogy test. So I don't know. I mean, again, I think The Last Jedi was a decent movie. It wasn't the greatest. But I liked that it was unexpected. I liked that different things happened. I didn't expect Snoke to die. I was like, whoa, Snoke died. I do have my own minor criticisms. Like, it bothered me that we don't know who Snoke is. I would have liked to know, like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Maybe that'll be answered at 9, but I don't have a lot of hopes. Because I know JJ he's not good at answering questions. He seems to be good at just asking them. So, and it also worries me because I know that 9 it has to wrap up a 9-movie saga. And I don't know how that's going to happen because 6 was the perfect ending to that saga. It's a perfect, beautiful ending. And I always felt like 7 was unnecessary. And if there's any problem with episode 8, it's that it doesn't need to exist. None of these films need to exist because 6 was the perfect ending. And then 7 just kind of felt like tacked on. And 8 is just there because 7 is there. So if anything, really, people should be mad at 7, not really at 8. So how 9 is going to end, I don't know. But 9 has to have an orgasmically amazing ending to satisfy all the fans. And I don't know how that's going to happen. That's what I'm worried about. And I don't know where it's going to go from here. Because it doesn't look like there's a lot where the story can go at this point. The end of 8 isn't like a cliffhanger like the other movies. And it doesn't seem like these stories were set up it doesn't, like, JJ didn't seem to have a plan like where he wanted the story to go. And Ryan just says, well, I'll just take the story and kind of make up my own story. And then JJ is going to continue, just kind of make it up as he goes along. I felt like starting with Empire Strikes Back and ending with Return of the Jedi, George Lucas knew where he was going with this. And it was the same with the prequels. That's why one of the reasons I love the prequels, because we knew where we were going. Lucas had a plan, starting with The Phantom Menace, ending with Revenge of the Sith. He had a plan. With this movie, it seems like they're making it up as they go along, and that's a problem. That's not good storytelling to me. And that's why I think that The Last Jedi is okay. But I liked it better than 7 because at least it was original. At least it showed us something different. It showed us that Luke had a power that we've never seen before. That was cool. That was exciting. So, it showed us different things. And that's what I want to see in 9. I want to see something I've never seen before. Because to me, that's what makes Star Wars great, is it takes us to another world. It inspires us. It excites our imaginations. It makes us want to tell our own stories. And I don't feel that these sequel films have done that. They're decent movies, but they're not anywhere near the level of Star Wars. So those are my thoughts. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack from this. I'm sure that I'm going to get tons of downvotes because it's not the popular opinion. I'm sure your comments are all going to be like, you're dumb. I'm expecting this, but I just felt like, hey, you know what? I'll go against the grain. I tend to do that. So maybe some of you will agree with me. If you do, give me a thumbs up or a nice comment. Thank you.